So I've got two teams, and I think the Phoenix Suns would qualify in this if I included them. I've got two teams at the very top of my big board and like a separate tier to themselves. I call this the Indiana Jones teams, right? Like this is Indiana Jones running through, trying to catch like that sliding rock that comes down. He's got like the whip behind him and whatever. Like it is like just barely the hat makes it through. The window is that close. And I have got the Milwaukee Bucks as my number one pick, the second pick overall in our little draft here. I think they're under immense pressure to win a second championship under the Giannis sort of era right now. Brook Lopez is 36. Damian Lillard is 34. Chris Middleton is 33. Pat Connaughton is 31. Bobby Portis is 29. Giannis is going to be 30 in December, which feels weird to me. Yeah. It feels like he's been 26 forever. Middleton has a player option next year. Brook Lopez is going to be an unrestricted free agent. Dame has 2 more years left on his contract after this. Giannis has 3. So it's not so much risk of like Giannis walking away or anything. But we have seen sort of the declining returns since basically they won the championship in 2021. Like this, Middleton's just not as good. Brook Lopez isn't as good. This team is aging. They made the huge swing at Damian Lillard for a reason. I still think that this team is a championship contender. I still think that there's a chance that they can come out of the East. I think Giannis is that good, and we just can't disqualify them as long as Giannis is on that roster. I think Damian Lillard is due for another big season. I think the two-man game is going to be better. I think Dame has a bounce-back year. I don't know. I'm kind of higher on the Bucks than I feel like a lot of people are. That said, I'm not that high on their future because it feels like this. I don't really have like how many years left do you think this team has, considering some of the decisions that the players and they have to make this summer? Is it 1? Is it 2? Maybe at the most 2. It feels very precarious right now for Milwaukee.
I'm completely with you on everything you said. They're definitely a title contender. I think we have been. Boston was so good last year. Philly and New York are both feel like there's just so much shiny and new with both teams that it's like then everybody's fired up about the Cavs and the Magic and the Pacers because they're coming up, and it's like, oh yeah, the Bucks, like they're still around too, I guess, right? And my thing is like, if you could just fast forward to round 1 of the playoffs, and if their guys are all there, they've got a chance at winning the whole thing. Like. Now, my question is, are they going to be there? What kind of shape are they going to be in? If they are there, are guys going to be hurt? And then with everything you said, I mean, you've got Dame and Giannis. We're at $100+ million on the salary cap for those two guys. Trust me, I get it, because people are like, oh, you don't understand the cap's going up. Trust me, I understand the cap's going up. But if there's anything I understand, it's that. But that's still half of the cap, for the next or more for the next few years at least. And at that point, that becomes very hard to fill out the remainder of the roster. And that's where you're either going to have to need Chris Middleton to deliver, or as awful as this sounds, and I mean, I try not to be soulless numbers guy all the time, but like you may need to trade him and turn him into something else that is younger, that can extend this window. This is something I remember going through with the Pierce, KG, Ray Allen Celtics was Danny Ainge kept making little moves because he's like, I'm trying to turn a 3-year window into 5, 6, 7, 8 years if I can. And they ended up really turning into about a 6-year window of contention with those guys when honestly they had no business being contenders after the first couple of seasons. But they were still right there battling to make it. And my thing is like, that's where you're at with the Bucks, and how you do that. Part of that is move on from a guy and you turn them into something else. You turn them into maybe a couple guys who are, they don't have to be kids, but you turn them into, all right, we've got these mid-career veterans, 2 or 3 guys that are coming in that can really help lift Giannis and Dame and maybe going to be more available. But yeah, I'm with you. Like there's not a long shelf life for this Milwaukee team just because of the age of so many of their players and the contract situation and how expensive the team is overall.
Yeah, just to put a pin in maybe having to make a move here in general, but like you just look at Giannis, again, going to be 30 in December, has played 3 total playoff games over the last 2 years because of injuries, right? He hasn't been able to finish playoff series the last 2 years because of injuries. And even like sort of quietly hasn't been super available in the regular season. It hasn't been like a huge issue, but like 73 games last year, that's fine. But 63 the year before that, 67, 61, 63, a couple of those are impacted by COVID. But like we're not at the same place of Giannis early in his career, just always playing like 80 games a year, like penciling it in, which used to be the case. Like and some of this is just maintenance, right? I get it. And it's not like a huge deal, but there is a little bit of wear and tear and some decline. And the fact that he hasn't been able to finish the playoffs the last 2 years is a really big deal for Milwaukee. So there's definitely some concern there. I don't know. I still think Giannis could be one of the best players in the league on any given night, right? He could be the number one player in the league any given night. The guy is still that good. I think it's fair to wonder, like, how much longer will he be at this level of dominant? I think he's going to be a top 10 player for a very long time. But, like, at this level, like, we've seen people kind of hit a cliff and then just sort of fall off. Who knows, at the risk of speculation, like, who knows when that's going to happen. But it does feel like if they were going to make a move, maybe it would be, I don't know, something would have to happen to, like, basically Giannis for them to, like, fully pull the plug on this season and make like a Damian Lillard or even like a Chris Middleton trade even by the deadline, right? Like, but if they don't get it done this year, then yeah, you got to start looking at how you're going to reset this thing and get younger. But the weird thing about that, Keith, and you know this, but like, you can't get that much younger.
No.
Right? Because you still want
to with Giannis and Dame.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even if you trade Dame, even if it's just Giannis, like you can't even, like, because we just saw this, like, yeah, Giannis is locked up under contract for a very long time, but we just saw this in Portland with Damian Lillard where it said, he's like, yeah, I know I just signed an extension, but like, it's just me and a bunch of teenagers. Like, what do you expect me to do with this group? Like, and then he forces his way out of there. You don't want Giannis risking that, even if you have him under contract. You don't want that to turn into that kind of situation internally. So, you want to try to get younger, but you don't want to like surround him with 23-year-olds either. So it could be that's a tough balance. Like, hey, let's trade Chris Middleton at 34 years old at that point for a young two-way wing who's almost as good as Chris Middleton. Like, what other team is going to make that deal? Like, that's not an easy trade to make.
No, and that's when you end up trading draft picks. And then that's how these teams end up in these awful spots when it really is. Now we're in the post Giannis years, and it's like, oh yeah, and we don't have 3 of our draft picks because we were chasing, the another title. Now there's something we said, if you believe you're close enough, and I firmly believe in this. I do think I'm going to say something that sounds maybe blasphemous given our topic here today, but I think people worry too much about windows sometimes, especially when a team hasn't won one. Like, go win a title. Like, it's forever. Like, you will always have that championship. So when you're close, go get it. Go do what you need to do to get it. Like, go win that championship. But that said, they did win one. So let's not mortgage everything to try to go get another one. And that's where it gets a little tough. And I'll say this with Giannis. I said this to a friend of mine the other day, and at first he was like, "Oh, that's insane." And then he came back to me like an hour later, and he's like, actually, the more I thought about it, I think that's kind of spot on. I think there's a greater likelihood Giannis wins a finals MVP before he ever wins another regular season MVP. Only because to win a finals MVP, that means he needs to be technically pretty great for a finals, but probably pretty great for an entire playoff run. I think he's got that in him probably a couple more times. I don't know that he's going to play the required games, 65 games, to win another NBA MVP. I think we're going to see a lot of the guys that we think of as the best players in the league. Some of them by default are just they're going to disappear out of those award conversations because they're just not eligible. Not only we're going to get down to a point where it's like, well, the 7th best player in the league won MVP because the first 6 guys weren't actually available enough to win it. Like, I don't think we'll ever get there, but I do think a guy like Giannis, to your point, we're still going to be talking to him as a top 5, top 10 player in the league. But that doesn't mean that's where he'll be in MVP voting because I just don't know that he plays enough.
It's a great point.